My best friend that day was on the patrol, Corporal Sean Longevin. We did everything together. Sean was killed that day. Kane Schilling had a bracelet I wear on my wrist made for us. He wears the same one, and it's got all their names of the guys who were killed that day. I'm gonna keep trying to make a life that any one of these guys would be proud of.
November 8th, 2007. Deep in the mountains of northeastern Afghanistan, 14 American soldiers and a squad of Afghan allies were about to walk into one of the deadliest ambushes of the war. In the remote Waigal Valley of Nuristan province, the village of Aranas had long been suspected of harboring Taliban fighters. But tonight, the village elders had extended an invitation, a shura meeting, a chance for dialogue. 1st Platoon, Chosen Company, 2nd Battalion, 503rd Infantry Regiment, 173rd Airborne Brigade Combat Team, the legendary Sky Soldiers, would answer that call. Among them was a 20-year-old specialist from Washington State who had been in the Army less than 2 years. His name was Kyle White, and in less than 24 hours, he would find himself alone on a mountainside, knocked unconscious by an RPG blast, fighting to save his brothers while bullets tore through the air around him. This is the story of the Battle of Aranas. Born March 27, 1987, just south of Seattle in Bonnie Lake, Washington, Kyle White grew up as an only child. He spent his free time on mountain bikes and dirt bikes, racing through trails in the Pacific Northwest. His father, Kurt White, had served in Special Forces during the tail end of the Vietnam era. That legacy weighed on Kyle. In February 2006, at 19 years old, Kyle wanted to join the Marines. His father had other ideas. A discussion followed. Army, Airborne. The 173rd. Kyle signed the papers. By August 2006, after basic training, advanced individual training, and airborne school at Fort Benning, Georgia, White reported to Caserma Ederle in Vicenza, Italy. He was assigned to Chosen Company as a grenadier and rifleman. The unit was training for Iraq. That changed fast. In February 2007, new orders came down. Afghanistan, Nuristan province, the Hindu Kush Mountains, some of the most unforgiving terrain on Earth.
I got to the unit in August of 2006, and the majority of the training period was focused for Iraq. It wasn't until our last training exercise when they came in, it's like, hey, mission change, we're going to Afghanistan now. Especially back in 2007, it's a pretty hot zone up there in Nuristan province. I remember getting off the helicopter and I asked where the base was and they just pointed up. I was not expecting.
Nuristan, the land of light, formerly known as Kafiristan, the land of infidels, until the Afghan government forcibly converted the region to Islam in 1896. The province sits on the southern slopes of the Hindu Kush, cut by deep river valleys and covered in thick forests. It borders Pakistan to the east. The terrain is vertical, accessible only on foot or by helicopter. In winter, completely isolated. The region had been a Soviet graveyard during the 1980s, a sanctuary for Mujahideen fighters who used the mountains and cave networks to devastating effect. By 2007, the Taliban, Hezb-e-Islami Gulbuddin, and foreign fighters from Al-Qaeda had moved in. The area was a corridor for insurgents crossing from Pakistan. Coalition forces called it Enemy Central. In May 2007, the 173rd Airborne Brigade deployed to Regional Command East as Task Force Bayonet. Over 3,500 paratroopers spread across Nuristan, Kunar, Lagman, and Nangarhar provinces, manning more than 20 outposts. The strategy was clear. Get off the big bases, live among the population, disrupt the enemy, win hearts and minds. Lieutenant Colonel Christopher Cavoli, commanding the 2nd Battalion, 503rd Infantry, pushed 2 combat outposts directly into the Waigal Valley. COP Ranch House near the village of Aranas. Cop Bella on the Waigal River near the hamlet of Bella, each manned by half an infantry platoon. Both positions were austere, reinforced walls, sleeping quarters, no showers, no comforts, just altitude, isolation, and Taliban watching from the ridgelines. Kyle White arrived at Cop Bella in the spring of 2007 as the platoon's radio telephone operator, the RTO, the lifeline to the outside world. August 22, 2007, 3 months before the ambush, COP Ranch House came under coordinated assault. over 60 insurgents attacked from the vicinity of the Aranas schoolhouse in a deliberate attempt to overrun the position. Only 25 Americans from 1st Platoon held the outpost. The attack was brutal, waves of fire from multiple directions. The platoon leader, 1st Lieutenant Matthew C. Ferrara, made a call that saved lives. He directed an airstrike on their own position, danger close, breaking the enemy's momentum. 11 Americans were wounded that day. None were killed. Ferrara was submitted for the Silver Star for his actions, but the writing was on the wall. Ranch House was untenable, too isolated, too exposed, supplied only by helicopter. On October 2nd, 2007, the decision was made. Ranch House was abandoned. The soldiers of Chosen Company suspected the villagers of Aranas had aided the attack, maybe even participated. Tensions ran high, but the mission continued. Engage the population, build relationships, extend government influence. November 8th, 2007. A representative from Aranas arrived at Kaupi Bella with a message. The village elders wanted to meet. Ashura. 14 American soldiers and a squad of Afghan National Army troops were selected for the patrol. 1st Lieutenant Matthew Ferrara, 24 years old from Torrance, California, would lead. A West Point graduate, Ranger qualified, airborne, already a proven combat leader after the Ranch House fight. Marine Sergeant Philip Box, 28, from Troy, Michigan, was attached as part of the embedded training team, advising the Afghan soldiers. Specialist Kane Schilling served as the forward observer, the eyes for artillery and air support. Sergeant Jeffrey Mearsman, Specialist Sean Langevin, Specialist Lester Roque, the platoon medic, and Private First Class Joseph Lancourt rounded out the patrol, and Kyle White, the RTO, carrying the radio that connected them to the world.
We had suspected some of the people in Aranas were either aiding Taliban in the area or were members themselves. They sent a representative requesting that we attend a Shura meeting there with the village elders. We left Kaupi Bella with 14 U.S. personnel and then about 10 Afghan National Army members.
They left Kaupi Bella under cover of darkness on the night of November 8th, moving along the high trail through the mountains. They arrived at Aranas, embedded down in the American-built schoolhouse on the edge of the village. The next morning, they prepared for the Shura, but the meeting was delayed. The elders were praying, the villagers said. Hours passed. Finally, at around 1:30 in the afternoon on November 9th, the meeting began at the mosque. But something felt wrong immediately. The turnout was massive. Every fighting-age male in the village seemed to be there. The questions from the elders were strange, irrelevant, probing, as if they were stalling. Then the interpreter picked up radio chatter, a language he didn't recognize. Sergeant Box moved quickly to Lieutenant Ferrara. "We need to go. This is bad. Now." Ferrara made the call. "Pack up. We're leaving." The patrol began moving out, taking the low trail back toward Kaupi Bella. A narrow path carved into the mountainside. A cliff face rose to their right. A rocky shale slope dropped away to their left. The soldiers called it Ambush Alley. It's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, maybe 3:15. The patrol is strung out single file along the trail. Kyle White is in the middle with Lieutenant Ferrara, Sergeant Box, Kane Schilling, and the interpreter. The rest of the platoon is ahead and behind, moving carefully, weapons up, eyes scanning. Everyone knows this is bad terrain, everyone's on edge. 20 minutes into the descent, a single shot cracks through the valley. Then 2 more. Then the entire mountainside erupts. Automatic weapons fire pours down from multiple directions. RPGs streak in, slamming into the rocks. Shrapnel and stone fragments explode across the trail. The patrol is pinned, no cover, nowhere to go. 10 of the 14 Americans are forced to slide and tumble 150 feet down the shale slope to get off the kill zone. The rest, White, Ferrara, Box, Schilling, and the interpreter, are cut off, stranded. Kyle White picks a spot on the hillside and dumps his first magazine, all 30 rounds as fast as he can pull the trigger. He drops the empty mag, slaps in a fresh one. The moment he does, an RPG detonates right behind his head, lights out. He wakes up face down on a rock, blood in his mouth, his head ringing. He lifts his face just inches off the stone, and a round impacts the rock, fragmenting. Shrapnel tears into the left side of his face. That brings him back fast. He rolls over. Behind him, Kane Schilling is running down the trail, dragging his right arm, blood pouring from a wound in his upper shoulder. "That's my buddy. He needs help." White sprints to him, pulls out a tourniquet, wraps Schilling's arm and cranks it tight. The bleeding slows. White looks around for cover. There's a lone tree up ahead, barely enough shade to hide under. He gets Schilling to the tree. White looks up the trail. He can see Lieutenant Ferrara's helmet and his pack, but not him. He's lying flat. White realizes what that means. He low crawls to Ferrara's position, checks for a pulse. Nothing. The platoon leader is dead. Then Kane yells, "Box is hit." White looks left, up the trail. Sergeant Box is out in the open, moving erratically, uncoordinated. He's hit bad, and he's completely exposed. If he takes another round, he's done. White makes a decision. Screw it. I'm going to get him. He sprints out into the open. Bullets snap past his head. Impacts kick up dirt at his feet. He reaches Box, grabs the back of his vest, and starts dragging him toward cover. The enemy shifts fire. They're shooting directly at him now, trying to finish Box. White sees it. He drops Box and runs back to the tree, waits for the fire to die down. Then he runs back out, grabs Box again, drags him a few more feet. The enemy opens up. White drops him again and sprints back. He repeats this 4 times, 4 separate sprints into the kill zone, dragging Box a little farther each time. Finally, he gets him under the tree. White pulls out another tourniquet, wraps Box's leg, tightens it down, but Box is fading. The wounds are too severe. White works on him, trying everything. Box dies there under the tree. White looks back at Schilling. Another round hits him, this time through the left knee. Schilling screams. White is out of tourniquets. He pulls off his own belt, wraps it around Schilling's leg, and tells him, "This is going to hurt." Schilling just says, "Do it." White cinches the belt tight, stopping the bleeding. As White sits next to Schilling, he tastes metal in his mouth, then a burning in his lungs. He and Schilling cover their mouths with their shirts. What is that? Chemical weapons? White sees smoke trailing over his shoulder. His radio pack is smoldering. The battery is burning up. His radio is dead. He checks Schilling's radio, also destroyed by small arms fire. White is the RTO. Without a radio, they have no support, no medevac, no help. He looks back at Sergeant Box, lying dead. White remembers. Box had a radio. He crawls back under fire, retrieves the radio. It works. Kyle White is now the last battle-ready soldier in that section of the mountainside. He keys the mic and starts calling in the situation. Troops in contact, multiple casualties. He calls for mortars, artillery, air support, anything that can keep the enemy from massing on their position. Apache helicopters arrive. They start making gun runs. A friendly 120mm mortar round lands close. The concussion hits White. Another traumatic brain injury. But he wills himself to stay conscious. He keeps fighting, keeps calling targets, keeps the enemy's heads down. The firefight goes on for more than 4 hours. The Taliban keep shooting as darkness falls, trying to force the Americans to return fire and give away their positions. White hides equipment in the rocks to keep it from the enemy. He treats 2 wounded Afghan soldiers who made it to his position. He refuses to give up. At 3:14 that afternoon, he had accepted he was going to die. But if that was going to happen, he figured he might as well help his brothers while he still could. As night falls, the medevac helicopters finally arrive. A massive combined operation. 8 separate air crews, 31 hours of continuous medevac and recovery missions. White assists the flight medic in loading the wounded, Schilling the Afghan soldiers. Only then does White allow himself to be evacuated. The final count was devastating. 6 Americans killed in action, 8 wounded. Every single member of the patrol that was initially ambushed became a casualty, 100%. The Afghan National Army lost 3 killed and 11 wounded. The Taliban reportedly lost only 1 fighter. The names of the fallen: First Lieutenant Matthew C. Ferrara, 24 years old, Torrance, California. The platoon leader who had saved lives at Ranch House just months before, posthumously promoted to captain. Marine Sergeant Philip A. Box, 28 years old, Troy, Michigan. The embedded training team advisor who warned them to leave. Sergeant Jeffrey S. Mersman, 23 years old, Parker, Kansas. Corporal Sean Aldrich Langevin, 23 years old, Walnut Creek, California. Kyle White's best friend. They did everything together. Corporal Lester G. Roque, 23 years old, Torrance, California. the platoon medic, Private First Class Joseph M. Lancour, 21 years old, Swartz Creek, Michigan. The Battle of Aranas marked November 9, 2007, as another brutal day in what would become the deadliest year for U.S. forces in Afghanistan since the invasion began in 2001. Over 100 American service members were killed in Afghanistan in 2007. Kyle White completed his 15-month deployment in Afghanistan. He came home and was assigned to the 4th Ranger Training Battalion at Fort Benning, where he trained other young paratroopers preparing to deploy. In May 2011, he left active duty. Using the post-9/11 GI Bill, he attended college, graduated, and became a financial analyst in Charlotte, North Carolina. But the transition wasn't easy. The memories stayed vivid, the sounds, the smells, gunpowder, burning metal, the faces of his brothers. Post-traumatic stress doesn't fade just because you put on a suit and walk into an office. The paperwork for Kyle White's Medal of Honor was delayed in the Pentagon for years. On April 15, 2014, President Barack Obama announced that White would receive the nation's highest military decoration. On May 13, 2014, at a White House ceremony, the medal was placed around his neck. He became the 7th living recipient of the Medal of Honor from the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. The 3rd from the 2nd Battalion, 503rd Infantry Regiment. At his Hall of Heroes induction the next day, White spoke about the 6 men who didn't come home. He said their names. Slowly, clearly, he wanted the world to know them. Kane Schilling survived. He was at the ceremony. The 2 men still wear matching steel wristbands, engraved with the names of the 6 fallen. They were made by one of the survivors shortly after the battle. Every man who walked off that mountain wears one. White made it clear that day and every day since. The medal isn't his. He wears it for them. For Ferrara, for Box, for Mersman, Langevin, Roque, and Lancour. Because they're not here, and he is. In his own words, I hope beyond hope that I can one day be worthy of their sacrifice. The Battle of Aranas, November 9, 2007. A goat trail on a mountainside in the Wagle Valley. 14 Americans and their Afghan allies walked into an ambush. 6 gave everything. One 20-year-old kid from Washington fought through hell to save his brothers, and their names will not be forgotten.